None of us need look far to find situations or circumstances that are not ideal. We each can see realities of life, difficult circumstances, things we wouldn't choose. We see these in our personal lives, in our families, in our church, in our community, country, and in our world. These things can be overwhelming. And sadly, some of us have learned that these have no place in a life of faith. We have been taught, either directly or indirectly, that either once we follow Jesus, hard things shouldn't happen to us, or we should pretend they aren't or skip past them, not express them, and simply claim our victory in Jesus. The truth is, we do have victory in Jesus. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus do empower us to live purposefully and abundantly in the kingdom, here, now, and forever. What is also true is that we don't get to living that abundant life by denying reality. And victory doesn't always mean our circumstances change. So what do we do with these circumstances we wouldn't choose? We turn to the biblical practice of lament. We learn to lament. We practice lament. So, what is lament? A lament is a prayer expressing sorrow, pain, or confusion. It's the invitation and prayer practice to process our grief in God's presence. Lament is not a laundry list of complaint. It's an invitation to bring our reality, to examine it before and with God. It is an invitation to name and remember with God and to find God in the middle of our circumstances and grief. Lament is anchored in our hope in God. It acknowledges that life is not as God initially created it to be. It allows us to bring the realities of life, the difficult circumstances, the things we wouldn't choose, the things that grieve our hearts to Him. Lament makes space to acknowledge our sorrow and let God offer hope in the midst. It creates a space where we can come in honesty and vulnerability and be reminded of who our God is and find a trust that lets us keep our hearts and heads turned towards God. I do feel compelled to warn you, prayer of lament is not a quick fix. It's not as simply, if I pray this prayer, all will be right in the world and my life. No, it is more a prayer practice that we will need to return to again and again. It's a practice that helps us turn toward God and acknowledge life in God's kingdom, allows space to name and notice reality, and experience God's sustaining presence in all aspects of our life in the midst of circumstances we desperately want to change. We are actually given numerous examples in Scripture that a walk with God does not require a denial of reality. Over 60 of the Psalms are Psalms of lament. In the scriptural Psalms of lament, we generally find at least 4 things are present in some form: a prayer crying out to God, an honest complaint, a request, and a vow of praise or confidence in God. The Bible offers evidence that we are allowed to bring it all to God. The prayer Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane can even be seen as a pattern of lament. While there are many ways or templates to practice lament, this guide is for a 2-part prayer of lament based on Lamentations 3:19-24. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for Him. In this 2-part pattern, We begin with a remembering, bringing to God our affliction and our wandering, Lamentations 3:19. We name them specifically. And then we enter part 2, the recall, the yet this I call to mind in Lamentations 3:21, where we recall the things we know to be true of God. This is where we find our hope. It's not lament without hope. And while that is true, I encourage you, don't rush through the first part to get to the last. Do your best to fully engage with both parts. So I invite you, let's practice lament together. I encourage you to write down the first thing that comes to mind. Feel free to stop the recording if you need more time for either part, or come back to it and add to your lament after. So we start with remember. Prayerfully name your reality. You do not have to pretend in the presence of God. Share honestly with God, whatever this is for you at this time. There is no right or wrong thing to bring to the Lord. Bring whatever you're experiencing, grieving, or seeing in your personal life, your family, your church, your community, country, or world. Is there a pain, a heartache, anger, or sadness that may need to be discussed with God? Talk to God about what you would like Him to do about what you have named. The second part is recall. Choose to also remember truths about God's character and His activity in the past. Name ways you have experienced His love or compassion, ways He's strengthened you or sustained you, ways you've seen Him in Scripture or in other people's lives. Ask Him to help you see where and how He is working in the situations you've identified. Is there a promise of praise you can make or an attribute of God you can thank Him for? Some examples. I dare to hope because God, you are good. God, your mercies are new every morning. Your faithfulness is great. Jesus sympathizes with me, we see in Hebrews 4:14-16. Take a moment and think about those things that you know or long to know to be true about God. While this lament guide contains 2 parts, it isn't just 2 steps. Take what you have written now and turn it into a prayer. Speak the words you have written to God, bringing both the realities of your life and the things you named about God and His character to Him. Repeat it as many times and over as many days as you need to allow your prayer of lament to help you experience God's peace and presence in the midst of your circumstances. Lament is a practice to return to. It isn't something we do once and never do again. And again, don't rush through the first part to get to the second. Give yourself the freedom to find the rhythm between remembering and the recalling that you need, and the rhythm and time the reason you are needing to lament needs. It's okay to spend equal time in each, or to spend more time in one or the other. There are no right words, way, or rhythm to pray a lament. So as always, pray as you can and not as you can't. I pray as you practice prayers of lament, you will experience God meeting you in the midst and feeling His deep and unshakable love for you.